Man, Trey, it is Sunday Night Football recap we're getting into today, man. I don't know about you, but that Jets game had me sweating for no reason at all.
Yeah, bittersweet, man. It's always fun to walk away with a win, but I like them to look like the Bears game, not like last night. But dub's a dub, dub's a dub. I'll take it.
At the end of the day, I guess we got to take what we can get. It's just, man, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of everything, but just the way that we flipped from Q1 on through to the rest of the game was like night and day, like flipping a light switch. It almost was reminding me, obviously the gravity wasn't the same as what it was playing the Bengals in the AFC Championship game, but that's kind of what it reminded me of. We basically just decided we weren't going to play our brand of football anymore, and totally changed the trajectory of the game to a team that I think we should have beat handily.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And we saw, like you said, a completely different football team. It looked like, maybe 2020 Chiefs out there in first quarter. And then we were looking like the 2012 Chiefs, for the rest of the game until we squeaked one out the last drive. So it's like I said, man, it's all about the dubs. And the thing to think about this team right now is that it's a continuous learning process, right? And it's the NFL. It's the best of the best. So if we continue to win games, but also learn from those mistakes that we're making, I think that's what's important. I think we can expect this team to see games in January being playoff games. So if we can fix those mistakes now, get those out of the way by end of December, then I'm all right with just hanging dubs up and winning gritty games.
Winning
Games.
ugly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to win ugly. Chiefs take the cake. Sunday Night Football, 23-20. We'll get into everything related to the game, but first, let's talk about our Atlas Saloon player of the game. I think you and I are both in agreement here. There really wasn't any other Chiefs player that could have touched the performance Isaiah Pacheco put out there. Pacheco put out there.
Absolute stud, man. And really, we've been waiting on this as Chiefs fans, waiting for this moment to come through, for Pacheco to really pop off and have himself a day. And 20 carries, 115 yards with the touchdown, 3 receptions of 43 yards. I mean, that's the kind of production we want to see out of the backfield. And quite honestly, it's the kind of production we have to see out of this Chiefs offense now, with the weak wideouts that we have and the weak wide receiver play that we've been seeing so far this season. So we've been screaming it since day one of the season. The ground game's got to get established.
No, absolutely. And Isaiah Pacheco, New Jersey kid, this was a homecoming game for him. So I feel like just the magnitude of that moment for him definitely elevated his level of play. We saw a similar situation with DeAndre Swift in Philadelphia. He's a Philly kid. He popped off for 175 and a touchdown in week 2. And so Isaiah is just kind of like following suit right there, really off. Finally, a viable Chiefs fantasy football player not named Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is huge.
Absolutely. And again, I think there was, a couple guys that, had opportunities. And looking at Rashee Rice, he had one drop, but that's a guy that got the most targets in the game last night. And I was sitting there talking to Strato, our buddy that we grew up with and have watched sports with and done the whole deal with our whole lives. And I'm lucky enough to have him as a neighbor now. So we do a lot of beer drinking, a lot of football watching. But we were watching the game last night with each other, and we were talking about how Rashee Rice could be that next guy that we need to step up and elevate the game for the receiving corps. And, if we continue to give those opportunities to him, he's going to continue to blossom. It could be that guy for us. So for me, that's who I'm looking for. Sky Moore hasn't done his job and taken the next step, kind of like that guy that we played against last night, Mecole Hardman.
I don't want to throw shade at Mecole Hardman. I think, with his his situation there in New Jersey, maybe it could have been a little bit different where he can pop off this year if Aaron Rodgers was under center, but definitely not what we're going to see from him this year. What I think has been s- an interesting comparison that they were making on the broadcast last night, Chris Collinsworth and Tarico, they were comparing him to Marshawn Lynch, just with the ferocity that he runs with, how thunderous he is whenever he gets through those holes, and he's just so aggressive every single time. It doesn't matter what he does. He's super violent with everything. The head shakes afterwards, and
Push-ups.
I thought it was an interesting comparison. And my wife actually, when we're watching the game, she's sitting on the couch and she goes, "Is he as big as Marshawn Lynch?" And I'm like, to tell you the truth, I don't really know how much of a size difference there is, and it's an inch and like 5 pounds is the difference between Isaiah
What?
Pacheco and Marshawn Lynch. Uh,
No way.
the one who's got the inch on him. So I was pretty shocked to learn that, and they are both, obviously bigger guys when you're looking at the tape. How much of that is getting embellished on that on those official measurements and weigh-ins, I'm not sure. But allegedly, they're really not that far off size-wise. But to
Wow.
get compared to Marshawn Lynch, I think is a huge compliment to him. He's got to do it a little more consistently to get to that level, though.
Yeah, that popped up on the screen, and the first thing I said was, man, that it's way too soon, and that's kind of disrespectful to Marshawn Lynch. I mean, that guy, he was and Strato asked me, he's like, they're not even the same size, are they? And my first reaction was, no, Marshawn Lynch was way bigger, and because he looked way bigger when they were showing those plays, those big ass pads that they used to wear, and
Oh
those
yeah.
big thigh pads they used to wear, and I mean, Marshawn Lynch moved earth when he ran. You know what I mean? He was mad at the
Oh yeah.
ground when he ran, but Isaiah
He's a
Pacheco
beast
runs the
quake.
same way. You know, the earth moves when he runs. So I'm all about it. And if you can continue down a path to match Marshawn Lynch, then watch out.
Hey, make those steps towards it. We saw what Marshawn did in Buffalo the first couple years, where you saw flashes. Obviously, he had some off the field issues, which is a problem for him in Buffalo with the DUIs and things like that. But then he just blossomed into what I think is potentially going to be a Hall of Fame player. So Pacheco's got a little ways to go before he gets there, but not a far off comparison, surprisingly, once you actually like dove into the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. But Dan, let's run into the post game injury report, and this is kind of a big one going into this week as well. We'll really dive into this later on in the week, but kind of looking at what things were like after the game. But this one's brought to you by Better Homes and Garden. My wife Katie is a real estate agent for Better Homes and Garden. Anywhere in the KC area, she's going to serve you. She's looking to put families in new homes, young families, wherever they want to go. If you just want to make a buck on your house, whatever it may be, my wife Katie is going to take care of you. Be sure you're calling my wife Katie Lawrence at Better Homes and Garden. Dan, let's talk about post game injuries. What are we looking like?
We got out of here relatively unscathed, to tell you the truth. Nick Bolton, Jalen Watson, both absent from the game. The only injury Andy Reid had anything to say about was Cole Christensen, our linebacker, which special teamer primarily, pulled his hamstring. Ended up not coming back to the game. One of those things where I'm sure he'll get monitored. With a hamstring, it's always tricky, with
Yeah.
the way that injury is just prone to flare ups and snags in the recovery process. So I wouldn't be surprised if we put him on IR to make a subsequent move. Him being a special teams kind of player, I would
Yep.
it would just make sense to take somebody maybe the practice squad to fill that gap that he's going to leave on the roster there. But ultimately, super healthy, which is more than what I was expecting, considering MetLife Stadium has a history of major injuries, being that it's a turf field. It has this negative stigma around it, rightfully so. We all seen the numbers related to, what what that can do to your soft tissue. They report about it all the time on the broadcast whenever they are hosting a game out there in New York. So the increase is there as far as the potential for risk, and it's a constant debate, something that the NFLPA has been fighting about, but basically very lucky to get out of there without any other major injuries to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's been a relatively healthy season so far. I'll knock on some wood, but we're through 4 games right now, and everybody that is a key contributor on this team, both on the offensive and defensive side, they've been able to remain healthy, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think take a look at the outlook for at least Nick Bolton. I think we're looking at week 7 right now, and so that is a big hit to a defense. It's played phenomenal football up until now, with and without Nick Bolton. So it'll be interesting to see how things progress. And obviously, I think I best linebacking core in the NFL by far, if you ask me. Those guys have absolutely stepped up. Drew Tranquill is a beast. We talked about him last week. Steps right into the role. But adding Nick Bolton back into that defense in week 7 is going to be a big damn deal for us. If we can hold teams to let's say 18 points without the safety, 18 points is a pretty low ceiling for Patrick Mahomes to score 19 points. You know what I mean? So if he can handle that and we can manage to continue on the same path we're on right now with the defense, we're going to be in good hands. But
right.
Yeah, I agree. I think we came out of there in a pretty good spot, out of that game as far as injuries go.
Yeah, there's really no reason why we can't score 20 points a game. I mean, you're looking at all the weapons that are on that offense. Say what you want about the receiving core. They're inexperienced. They need to have some more time to gel together. Those are all fair points, but at the end of the day, you have the best quarterback in the National Football League, the best tight end in the National Football League, the best play caller, and I would say a top 15 running back in Isaiah Pacheco, not to mention a top 5 offensive line. There's zero excuses to not score 25 points a game. So,
Sure.
with that being said, the defense has been pretty darn good. And I was a little bit nervous in the running game, in particular, with Nick Bolton's absence, everything that he's able to do from just a play recognition standpoint, understanding what teams are going to be running with their certain formation shifts and that sort of thing. He's always got the blue dot on his helmet, so he's always that guy that's sort of directing traffic on the defensive side of the ball. And so seeing Drew Tranquill come in and really step up, I know him and Chanel got a lot of several reps in pass coverage as well, which we'll talk about here in a little bit whenever we dive into the position groups, which I'm covering defensive backs, but I think it's important to note what some of those linebackers were doing. All of that's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. But before we get into that, I do want to break down the betting results from last week. So the Kansas City Chiefs were favored 9.5 points to the dismay of several Chiefs bettors out there. Mahomes had the opportunity to get the cover, score the touchdown, kick the extra point, win by 10. Instead, he pulls a Jerick McKinnon, the Super Bowl, slides at the 1-yard line, does his best, are you not entertained pose, and then called game basically on that run. So very heartbreaking for anybody that took the Chiefs to cover. If you haven't learned by now, the Chiefs do not cover. That's just the facts right there.
Agreed.
But I know a lot of people were disappointed about that.
Yeah, so I was listening to 610 today, 610 Sports Radio here in Kansas City, and they were talking about, that there's always going to be that debate on whether somebody is actively, trying to play spreads as a player, coach, referee, whatever it may be, and it was brought up Patrick Mahomes because he slid right there at the end of the game, right, to run out the clock or to get into final position, but. In the climate we're in now in sports, it's almost impossible for players, coaches, whoever it may be, to not know what spreads are going into a game, right? And they made a good point on the show today that, Colorado, they knew that they were 21-point dog. They were 21-point dogs going into that game, right? And So it's hard not to know, but to label somebody as they're swinging games, for some gambling in the NFL, I think it's a stretch. Obviously some people are going to be pissed off, and I watched Strato. He was pissed off walking out of my yard last night because he took it. So,
Oh yeah.
it is what it is. I don't. I don't think he was a part of that. I don't think he's trying to swing into any games or anything. But over under was sitting at 42.5. That hit, obviously, barely. I
Get
don't
that
know
half
how
point
Vegas
kicker,
gets
baby.
so close, man. They get so close every single time.
They've
Every
got
time.
something figured out over there that none of us are ever going to figure out, and I've
Yeah,
just come to accept that.
yeah, yeah. So I think we're going to take a look at now, the spreads that I took on the show from last week. So Pat Mahomes, passing yards, 275.5. I took the over. Obviously, the under. Pat had one of his worst games we've seen him play in the Chiefs uniform.
204 passing yards.
Yeah, yeah. 175.5 for Wilson on the other side of the ball. That was I took the under on that. That was the over. Guy looked like Aaron Rodgers on that one drive when they tied it up. I looked at Strato, shit you not. I looked at Strato. I was like, is that Aaron Rodgers? And then
He came down from the booth
yeah,
and like possessed Zach Wilson
yes,
for a minute. He space jammed him, like reverse space jammed him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he looked good. Every pass was a back shoulder, and they showed the replays, and I was like, what the hell's going on here, man? But McKinnon 10.5 yards rushing over. That's a no-brainer for me. I'll take that every time. He didn't hit it, but I'm taking that every time, dude. 10.5. That's disrespectful. Watson for 22.5. I took the over on that. That was the under. I should have known with the play we've seen in the wide receiver core. And then Pat Mahomes, half interception. Obviously, I took the over and slammed that one home. Almost with 3 picks. He got away with one there at the end, which is kind of a hot topic right now as well. With
Could have
the
taken the alt over on that bad boy.
yeah, yeah. So that's what we're looking at, though.
Yeah, McKinnon only gets 7 yards on the night. I think he just had one attempt, really. Watson, 1 catch for 5 yards. Nothing going there. 242 passing yards for Zach Wilson. Ends up trading places with Patrick Mahomes for the night. So those are your best bets for Sunday Night Football against the New York Jets. We're going to get some more of those out to you guys, get them on social media as we move through the season so that you can follow along with our picks. I might start a hashtag fade Trey on the player props, though, after that one.
Uh,
It was rapid fire. It was rapid fire. Let's get into the game highlights, starting with the celebrities that were in the house. Taylor Swift, I think she was shown on the screen like 17 times, approximately. Harold Kuntz, he put out a tweet that had the full scoreboard with mentions and how many still shots they had of her. She's joined there with Sophie Turner, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, and of course, my favorite celeb that was in the house, Paul Rudd, a true Chiefs fan. So it was pretty wild seeing that. I don't know if they just don't focus on celebrities as much during the broadcast on a typical broadcast. I know Bradley Cooper is a big Eagles fan.
yeah,
Kevin Hart, big Eagles fan. They're probably at a lot of games, but you don't ever see it as a focal point. With the magnitude that much star power had in that suite, and we all know who the main focus was up there.
yeah. Donna Kelsey.
It's just hard to ignore. Yeah, Donna, baby. Shout out to Donna Kelsey, birthing 2 of the most successful NFL players in the history of the sport.
Yeah,
But no, that was pretty wild seeing just how many people turned out. And I don't know the intricacies of who's friends with who in Hollywood and that sort of thing. That's not my speed necessarily. But just seeing Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, who both are filming Deadpool 3, as a comic book nerd myself, I was pretty pumped to see that. And I'm pretty sure the director for that new movie's in attendance as well. So that was pretty cool to see them come out together. I think they've been filming most of that movie in Canada. So just a hop and a skip to get down to New York for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, with the Taylor Swift stuff going on, this has brought in a lot of different Swifties. I think we were talking about this off camera. Brought in a lot of Swifties to enjoy some Kansas City Chiefs football with their husbands. So, I think we were sitting there last night, my wife Katie and I, with Strato and his wife Taylor, and I think they spent about half the game talking about Taylor Swift, and I think the other half was about Donna Kelsey. So. Strato and I kind of sat over to the side and we're talking shit about the game. And, they did their own thing talking about Taylor Swift. And, it all went well. But, yeah, she brings a lot of firepower up there during the Chiefs games, man. They want to talk about that. That's for sure. But I got to tap on Donna Kelsey real quick. So she went to the Eagles game at the 3 o'clock game, the Eagles game, and watched the game there. And she sat with Jake from State Farm, the actual guy in the commercial.
How funny is that?
And Pat Mahomes. And then she goes up to New York to watch the game up there with the Chiefs and the Jets. And she's up there sitting with Taylor Swift. I mean, what a rock star life she's living now, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I used to do some Uber driving back when, and I actually had the pleasure of picking Donna up from Travis's house here in Kansas City and taking her downtown to an event that was going on. But yeah, that was a surreal moment for me. So I feel like just, but rubbing shoulders with Donna a little bit, I feel like I was kind of in that suite too,
Dude, you never told me that.
Have I not told you that?
No, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. That's probably the most famous person I picked up in my Uber crusades.
Damn. All right, Dan.
Pretty wild.
Game highlights.
Yeah, I'm ready to talk all about the great things the Chiefs did, but first I want to highlight Zach Wilson. I think that kid had a hell of a game. Everything that he did under center after the first quarter was just exactly what you expect from a second round pick. I think his focus is definitely shown as far as preparation, the ability to adjust to kind of what's going on, what's being given to him in situations, and his humility. At the end of the game, you just saw it on the sideline where he's, given the chest tap, it's on me because of that fumble. Turk Wharton, baby, came in and recovered that one. But
yeah.
I just think that humility, that maturity that we're seeing from him, that's been pretty cool for the Jets. The Jets have gotten a lot of criticisms for Robert Saleh and his belief and his trust in Zach Wilson. And it's kind of paying dividends right now because I think that's what any young quarterback needs is the support, unwavering, whatever the situation is, that unwavering support from the head coach is always going to pay dividends. So Zach Wilson played a hell of a game and he outplayed the best quarterback in the NFL on Sunday night.
Yeah, it's impressive. Yeah. So, I mean, looking at the Jets, the scheme of how the Jets are playing out right now, did Zach Wilson buy a couple weeks or did he buy a whole season with that game?
I think he just bought a couple weeks. I don't think you can give him the full season yet, right? If he reverts back to what we saw against Dallas or any of the games up to this point, there's a really good chance that they look to one of those backups. They did sign, I think, Trevor Siemian to the practice squad a few weeks ago. Not that there's a ton of options on that roster.
So it's crazy to think for a young quarterback, making one mistake, that fumble, fumbling the snap like that, and the Chiefs recovering, how a small mistake like that can flip a game. Obviously we've been watching football for a while and understand how that works, but for him to have such a monumental game against the Chiefs and Pat Mahomes and the reigning Super Bowl champs, and then to lose it because he was looking at his receiver and trying to make a play half a second too fast and fumbled the snap. it's all gone like that, and that's a hard lesson learned, man. That's a hard lesson
Yeah.
learned, but that's part of the gig. And we saw the same thing with Pat throwing 2 picks, right? And he didn't play very good football. Those 2 picks, man, I swear I could have thrown the football about the same. Lobbed him up right to those deep end field.
Similar arm talent on those throws. Similar arm
I was
talent.
like, the first one, I was like, okay, big. That's just a mistake, back foot. He makes back foot throws all the time, but he makes more good throws on his back foot than he does bad throws, right? And then the
Right.
second one, and I was like, man, what the hell did what just happened to my man Pat Mahomes? He looks like Jalen Hurts in the Super Bowl. He can only throw 30 yards. But those are weird throws, man. Yeah, I expected a little more out of decision making there. And typical Pat Mahomes fashion, post game and next day press, complete responsibility for the throws. So, I mean, obviously, as Chiefs fans, we don't expect to see that next week. Matter of fact, we might see a man on a mission next week and for the rest of the season. So, um, yeah, weird plays with Pat there, man.
We typically get some bounce back performances whenever guys underperform. I mean, at what we even saw in that Chicago Bears game, coming back off of the week 2 win, they just looked like a totally different team. It looked like the offense was finally clicking. I guess we're back on the downslope of that roller coaster until we can pick it back up and get right back up the hill. So I'm expecting us to get it back up. I think it really starts with the receivers and Patrick being on the same page. We only had 7 catches across the entire receiving core. 3 of those were to Rashee Rice, which I love seeing the rookie get a lot of work and a lot of play early. But you got to be able to trust those guys a little more. You got to be able to get on the same page as those guys. The 2 underthrown picks were on Mahomes. I think there was a lot of situations where the guys just weren't getting open either, and he was having to flush the pocket, maybe break for a couple runs, which he did effectively on that 3rd and 25 and some
Yep.
other key plays as well. But Mahomes really got lucky on that 3rd interception with that holding call. He got lucky that Sauce tugged on that jersey and got caught doing it. Um, really, with the way the game was officiated, we can get into that in a second. But with the way that that game was officiated and the fact that there was just a lot of inconsistencies there, Mahomes definitely got lucky with that call. Now, with regard to Chris Jones, I do want to highlight him as well. He has been a force since coming back to the team. 3.5 sacks in 4 games, just constant pressure, whether it's in the middle, on the edge, doesn't matter where you're lining this guy up. He's taking quarterbacks down, forcing them into bad decisions. It's just been awesome to see him back on that defense. We're noticeably a different team with him on the field. He brings a lot of energy, and I definitely want to give him a shout out for the post game response to Rodney Harrison. Rodney Harrison was just berating Zach Wilson. I don't know if you watched the post game presser at all, but
No,
they
I didn't.
had Chris Jones down on the field, and Rodney Harrison was asking Chris Jones, did you expect this level of play from him? Essentially, Chris Jones said, yeah, he's a great player. He was picked early. That's why they picked him. You know, took the high road, took the honorable approach to it, and then Rodney Harrison comes back with, you don't really think that? I mean, he's garbage. And Chris Jones
Damn.
doubled down on what he said originally, and it's like, man, props to you for not taking that bait. I've never been a huge fan of Rodney Harrison on the broadcast, to tell you the truth, but 'cause I've always thought he was a homer. But I love what I've seen from Chris Jones for sure in the
Yeah,
presser.
it's good. Especially the part you talked about on the field, and I think him and Karlaftis, they complement each other so well. You got the bull rush coming up the middle from Chris Jones, and you have the absolute motor coming off the edge from Karlaftis, and I think that complements moves that you can make from the D line standpoint, very well. To come out, no preseason, essentially no offseason with the team, and have 3.5 sacks is awesome to see, and I hope he continues the success. Now, obviously, a new bar has been set with 6 sacks by my
Khalil
man
Mack,
Khalil Mack. Yeah,
beast.
almost fumbled the name there, but 6 sacks is impressive. But yeah, the post game stuff. I didn't listen to the post game. Game ended. I went and took a shower, crashed.
Lights out.
Yeah, dude, I was toast. I had to go. But let's tap into the officiating real quick. Right before we get into the focus groups, you talked about that earlier with you're going to jump into the D backs. But before we do that, let's jump into officiating. That's been a hot topic for the last 24 hours or so about the game. What's the landscape looking like on officiating from the game?
Yeah, I mean, if you pull up your Twitter app or your X app and take a peek at what everybody's saying about the officiating, it's that Patrick Mahomes gets the Tom Brady treatment, gets the Chiefs get the Patriots treatment, we get all the calls, blah blah blah. I said Patrick Mahomes was lucky that they called that holding on Sauce Gardner. It was a holding call. Okay, he turns his pads, grabs the jersey, ticky tack, sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a lot more contact on other plays that wasn't called. But the fact of the matter is, the ref, who is in a live game situation, had whatever angle he had to make that call.
Yeah.
The same situation applies with the horse collar tackle, where Noddy clearly pulls the front of the jersey down, does not get into the pad shelf, which is where you get that horse collar
Yep.
call. And typically, and Collinsworth, I know, explained this on the broadcast, but it's the side or the back of the pads, the shelf. Essentially, that's what causes those neck injuries, those head injuries from those types of tackles. And it's clearly was a jersey situation. So whatever angle that ref had in that moment, whatever his perspective was, he made that judgment call. So when you take a look at officiating, there's always going to be questionable or bad calls because 99% of those calls are judgment calls. It's never so clearly black and white as false start, right? Yeah. So with those situations, I mean, there was a play right before the end of the half where Mike Dana's helmet magically falls off of his head, ends up on the turf, and Justin Reed's foot plants into it, and he stumbles just in time for CJ Uzama to catch a touchdown. Nothing was called there in that instance, and no one's up in arms about it. So I think people are just really choosing their battles when it comes to those situations, and that's just the nature of the game. We're always going to see people crying about the officials. They didn't call this, they did call that.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line with the NFL. It's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. And the fact is, I'll be the first one to start crying about officiating too when they don't go my way. So it is what it is. I understand the argument, but I mean, at the bare minimum, it was illegal contact by Sauce. He altered the route, and once I think you can determine that the route was altered, I think that's what changes the call. And whether it's called every single time or not, I think that's the real argument, is that there's no consistency in the NFL officiating, and I understand that, and it is what it is. At the end of the day, like you said, these guys are making judgment calls, and it's an on the fly, 100 miles per hour call. And to the horse collar point, all that ref saw was the guy go down in an awkward position, shoulder first, like they see all the time with horse collar tackles. So
right.
He could see that it was only jersey. All he saw was the guy go down like that, and he's got to call that. So I'm not mad at him for making that call. If somebody saw something in the back of the defense, the whatever ref is back there, and saw that wasn't a horse collar, then yeah, have the conversation and make the right call. But it's not enough to change the game for me personally. And I fully
Yeah.
believe you can't blame it on the refs. If there's blatant, one-sided calls, then yeah. But it was pretty even to me in this game. But Dan, let's jump into focus groups here. So you talked about taking on the DBs for this week. We want to take a deep dive into position groups. Each week when we recap games, we're going to take a look at what went well, what could be better, what we're looking at from a pass game perspective. So Dan, why don't you start us off with the defensive backs here?
Yeah, all things considered, I was actually very happy about the defensive backs in last night's game. There was the obvious touchdown that went on uh, Justin Reed that I talked about just a moment ago. I'm going to put that on him tripping on the helmet. Maybe he's in a better position to make a play on that ball to keep CJ Uzama from catching that touchdown and getting them in a position where they could tie it when they got the ball back in the third quarter. Now, that those drives Zach Wilson was putting down, this is where I'm going to go with the linebackers. Those impressive throws were to tight ends who were being covered by linebackers. Drew Tranquil on the first back shoulder throw that he threw to, I believe it was CJ Zama. That first one that he threw, Drew Tranquil actually had a really good position on the ball and got his hand in there. It was just a fantastic catch by Uzama at the end of the day. The second one, Chenault just gets beat.
Yeah, yeah.
Burned down the sideline, tight end snags the ball and is able to put them in a position to eventually score some points. Now, where I really want to highlight a battle that I was watching all night was L'Jarius Sneed against Garrett Wilson. L'Jarius Sneed primarily was lining up across from Garrett Wilson in that game last night, and everything that I saw was just a heavyweight bout. There was multiple times where Sneed would lock him up.
Yep.
There was a few times where Garrett Wilson would get excellent separation, which Garrett Wilson, in my mind, is a top tier talent at the wide receiver position. You put him with any other viable top 5 quarterback, and he is in the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson stratosphere, I believe. So,
Sheesh.
yeah, get him the right quarterback, and he's doing some damage. I was so excited to see what Aaron Rodgers and him were going to do this season. But to get back to the point, Garrett Wilson is an elite receiver, and we were able to do enough against him to where he was not able to beat us, right? We canceled him out for the most part in terms of just overproducing. When you catch 9 passes, he was the primary focus from a target standpoint, but we held him to just 60 yards on those 9 catches. So most of it was short yardage situations. He wasn't doing much after the catch. It was about 14 yards was the longest pass for him in that game. Where I think we got killed was that Alan Lazard touchdown where he beats us deep for the 39-yarder. That was a big one that kind of, I mean, it could have put the nail in the coffin for us at the end of the day. So you want to prevent as many of those plays as possible, but considering we didn't have Jalen Watson out there, who is a starting corner on this defense, he's probably our third guy in that defense with Sneed playing primarily slot or nickel in most of the lineups. I was really happy to see what I saw from the team, and I do want to highlight Brian Cook as well. Brees Hall breaks it deep, gets into the second level on that long run, and the open field tackling from Brian Cook on that particular play was fantastic. It was
Yeah.
enough to give us a chance to stay in that game, and ultimately you could count that play as a key play for not letting that turn into a much bigger game than what it could have been. So ultimately, those are the standout pieces. McDuffie had a phenomenal game. You didn't see a lot of passes getting caught on him while he was in those positions battling it out with those Jets receivers. And really most of those plays came from passes against the linebackers or in zone coverage. And then another quick highlight, Mike Edwards coming in for the sack from the defensive back position. You love it when those DBs are playing into Spagnuolo's scheme where they're able to rush, hit those gaps, and come in and make an impact. And that ended up being one of the key plays for us as well on that flea flicker. So definitely impressed with what I've seen from the defense, of course, and the DB showed out in that game for sure.
Agreed. Yeah, Strato and I had a conversation last night about how impressed we've been with the young talent that we have in the secondary. So I think we have a couple of years to enjoy what we have in the secondary right now. Obviously, it depends on what we end up doing with Justin Reed and Jerry, but liking what we're seeing right now in this season. So I'm gonna enjoy while I can for sure. But Dan, my focus this week was the offensive line. I'm going to bring that in with a little shout out to our friends down at the Atlas Saloon. So, got myself a nice little glass here. You know those boys on the O line. Creed Humphrey is slugging beers. So the place he needs to go is the Atlas Saloon. So Keith down there is been crafting beer down there since 2018, and he's got 10 beers on tap. 5 of those are German lagers, and that's his specialty. So, Keith has a lot of events that he does down at the Atlas. He's got open mic night on Wednesdays and free pool on Wednesdays as well. And then every home game or away game for Chiefs, there's a watch party down there at the Atlas. There's tons of food, beers being drank all over the place. So that's the place to be. If you're not at Arrowhead, you want to be at the Atlas Saloon drinking Keith's craft beers. So that's located downtown Excelsior Springs. They've done a great job in downtown Excelsior with revamping that place, and the people down there are great. But Dan, the O line. So there was a lot of hype going into the game about what our O line, what kind of where they ranked in the league compared to others, and we've had ups and downs for sure. I would say that our interior line, being Joe Tooney at left guard, and Creed Humphrey at center, Trey Smith at right guard. Trey Smith is a certified killer, and those guys are phenomenal football players, and they match each other well in the interior line. So I think our weaknesses have been, at the tackle position. I want to start with the good. I want everybody to kind of see what good's coming out of this team, and I'll dive into some of the other things. 2 sacks, only 2 sacks allowed this year so far. That's pretty damn impressive. One of those sacks was against the Jets. And then you have to take a look at the run game. We already talked about Isaiah Pacheco and what he did yesterday against that Jets defense, which you got to give the Jets defense credit. That's a hell of a defense that they stacked up against our offense. So 137 yards on the ground per game right now is what the Chiefs are averaging. So you got to give credit to the O-line for that success, right? And granted, I will say Pat's got 38.5 yards on the ground per game is what he's averaging right now, which is quite a bit. And obviously those runs are not scheduled into the playbook. Pat's not taking read options off the edge. Those are all scrambles out of the pocket. So that's something to keep in mind, thinking about Pat's rushing yards, like we saw in the last 1 or 2 minutes last night to seal up the game when he slid on the 1 or 2 yard line. Now the bad penalties, man. The penalties are killing the Chiefs on the front 5. Absolutely killing us. If you look at what a penalty does on the offense, it's similar to what a sack does, right? If you get sacked for 7 yards, you get sacked for 10 yards, you're getting set back 2nd and 20 at that point. If you get a holding call, it's 2nd and 20, right? You're getting set back. So those are doing the same as a sack. If we have only 2 sacks, like I've mentioned, which is phenomenal, but if you continuously have penalties at the front 5, then they're going to hold you back quite a bit. So as of right now, we have 9 penalties from Jawan Taylor himself throughout the season so far. So that's got to be corrected. We've obviously seen him bench for a period of time in week 2. And then again last week. So, I know that's being addressed. But back to the point earlier we talked about, it's just got to continue to get better each week.
Yep.
We got to continue to fix those things each week, and it can't be a lingering problem. So that's the bad. Now I want to talk about the ugly. The good, the bad, the ugly, Dan. You know what I'm talking about. PFF, Pro Football Focus. So pass grades, we're gonna play a little game here, Dan. Pass grades. I'm gonna read out a number. You tell me who you think got this pass grade. 25.7. 25.7 pass grade. Who you taking?
Ah, man, I can't in good conscience play this game because I'm looking at the cheat sheet. But
All right.
it's Jawan Taylor.
Yes. All right, so I'll run through them. Jawan Taylor, 25.7. We had two offensive linemen that were in the 20s for pass grades against the Jets. The other one, Trey Smith, my man I was just talking about, 22.5 PFF grade, pass grade. Creed Humphrey had 52.3. Joe Tooney, 61.5. And my man Donovan Smith led the pack with an 82.6.
That's a good grade on PFF.
It sure is. So I think, on top of that, the ugly, I think you got to have in the back of your mind as a Chiefs fan is the $80 million that we dropped or committed to with Jawan Taylor and with the play we've received from that contract. So that's something to ponder. We want to see him get better, but that one kind of stings and kind of tastes a little salty right now. So that's good, the bad, the ugly on the whole line, baby.
No, I love that breakdown, what we've seen so far from the offensive line. These guys have been pretty good as a unit. Now, the penalties need to get cleaned up for sure. 9 penalties. The broadcast pointed this out that he leads the league in accepted penalties for a single player, period.
Yeah.
And that's across 4 games. I mean, you're getting penalized at least 2 times per game. I only wonder how many of those were in key situations where we could have extended a drive, maybe lost out on points,
Yep.
that sort of thing. I did want to compare the numbers that you brought up from a rushing perspective because it's showing improvement through this first quarter of the season compared to what we did last year as a unit. So 115.4 rushing yards per game from 2021 through 2022. Mahomes averaged 21.1 yards per game last year on the ground. So we're talking about a 20 to 22 yard per game increase as a team, with Mahomes increasing 10 of that and the running backs increasing 10 of that. So that's pretty great to be able to see that from that perspective. So everything that you've said so far about the offensive line, I tend to agree with. Contract situation with Jawan Taylor, I mean, 20 million a year from the right tackle standpoint. I think they're doing a little bit of predictive forecasting there as far as what that potential price tag is going to look like down the line. So I'm not too bent out of shape about it. I think the refs are definitely picking on him a little bit in terms of calling maybe a little more ticky-tack fouls. Now, he just needs to know that the officials are going to be officiating him that way and clean it up. I mean, at the end of the day, he'll say that to you himself. Before we wrap it up, I did want to do a quick recap of the AFC landscape. Now, this is going to be brought to you by our friends over at eCoffee. You can check them out at www.eeroastscoffee.com. Visit them on Instagram at eeroastcoffee. And if you go to their website, you can check out all of their coffees that they're bringing in from all across the globe. The countries with the best coffee, I'm talking Ethiopia, the Congo, the Colombian blend. They're bringing in all of those different coffees, and they even have espresso, which I know for me, for my wife, we're always putting together some iced lattes at the house with the K Cafe, and eCoffee's always fueling that for me. So make sure you check them out, put an order in, get a subscription going, www.eeroastcoffee.com. AFC standings after this week. The Giants and Seahawks are playing tonight on Monday as we're recording. On Tuesday, you'll have the results for the full week 4 slate. But currently, as it stands, the Kansas City Chiefs are 3-1, the 1 seed in the AFC, followed by the Buffalo Bills at 3-1, Ravens at 3-1, and then the entire AFC South is 2-2, top to bottom. Which I did not expect that for the Colts and the Texans in particular. But what a great showing for those teams so far. CJ Stroud is on a trajectory to get Rookie of the Year, which has been fantastic. Some other contenders to look out for are the 3-1 Dolphins and the Jaguars, Titans, and Browns at 2-2. Pretenders, I'm talking about the Cincinnati Bengals at 1-3. The odds of getting to the playoffs are minuscule at this point for those guys. They play the Arizona Cardinals. They have a chance to turn it around, but the schedule does not get lighter for them as the season continues. The Steelers, Texans, and Colts, all in my mind, up and coming teams, sit at 2-2 as well. I mentioned those bottom two previously. And then in the AFC West, the Chargers, man, they almost chargered it. They went 2-2. Brandon Staley was just begging to throw this game away, give McDaniels another win over there in Vegas. The Raiders fall to 1-3. The Broncos earned their first victory in overtime and moved themselves to 1-3 as well. We talked about key matchups in the AFC last week. The game of the week was clearly Miami and Buffalo. Buffalo pulls that game out 28-20. Baltimore wins 28-3. Sorry, Falcons fans, if that triggers anything. And then Cincinnati and Tennessee, the Titans pull that one out 27-3. And of course, we just mentioned that Chargers and Raiders game. Honestly, those games were very, very disappointingly boring, except for the Dolphins and Bills game. I really don't think there's a true front runner in this AFC. At least no one that the Chiefs should be overly concerned with. The Bills, if they string together another performance like what they put up against the Dolphins, then you know definitely you can move them back into that conversation. But the Dolphins defense has been rough.
Yeah, I think we talked about it yesterday. Actually, we were texting back and forth. One, what a great weekend it was of football. But two, how there's such a there's no gaps in the NFL this year. It's everybody has a shot right now, unless you're Joe Burrow or the Raiders, sorry. And everybody else is like kind of middle of the pack, trying to figure their shit out and trying to figure out where they fit in and who they can beat. And up until yesterday, it was Miami, and everybody's kind of like, damn, Miami dropped 70. They might be the real deal. And then Buffalo comes out and beats them by 28 and hangs damn near a 50 burger on them. And so and the Eagles almost lost in overtime. And, I think that's going to chalk up. If the whole season stays like this, it's going to be a damn good season of football. I think we're in for.
No, it's going to be fantastic. The Chiefs still have the Bills, Dolphins, and Bengals on the schedule, not to mention the Chargers 2 times. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing those games kind of play out and what the rest of the AFC landscape's going to turn out to be. But man, what a great start to the season. They always talk about the season in terms of quarters, and we came out in the plus column with 3-1 record through 4 weeks. So that's been pretty excellent to see from the Chiefs. Let's string together a couple more of those and host another AFC Championship game. What do you say?
Absolutely, brother. Let's do it.
All right. We'll see you guys later this week for the preview against the Minnesota Vikings on the road. So take care. See you on Red Friday.
Let's go, Chiefs.